'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through my house not a creature was stirring, only my mouse. YouTube was on, as well as it should, with car-related content from fenders to hood. And then it came out like a deer in a sleigh, another misnomer, cliche, and dismay. On Fuelie, on 3-speed, on 3/4 cams, I can stand it no longer. So on goes my cam. My little poem. Thought it was appropriate since this is Christmas Eve. Well, I was watching some YouTube recently. Imagine that, I watch YouTube too, right? And I was watching something, the guy was buying a car, and the guy selling the car goes, "That's not a 4-speed. He goes, "That's a 3-speed with overdrive." I've heard that before. It's referring to the Mopar 833 overdrive transmission. Okay, folks. Yep, I've heard it before, and if you look at it scientifically, yeah, it has a low gear, which I believe is a 3.09 to 1, and then it's got a second gear, which I think is 267-ish to 1. Third gear is 1 to 1. Right, so that's where they get the 3-speed from, because it's 1 to 1 by third gear. And then fourth gear is 0.73, if I'm correct. Okay, well, that being said, the 833 new process, I think it's a new process, as they call it, overdrive 4-speed. If you look at an 833, an A833 Mopar transmission, an 833 is an 833 is an 833. Now they have fine spline, coarse spline, different gear ratios for 6-cylinder, 8-cylinder, Hemi, 6-pack, blah blah blah. But they're all 4 speeds. If you have 3 speeds and an overdrive, how many is that? I'll let you guess. If you buy a Tremec 5-speed, is 5th gear 1 to 1, or is it overdriven? Yeah, it's overdriven. So how come they don't call a Tremec a 4-speed with overdrive? Because it's a 5-speed. If you got 5 forward gears, you got a 5-speed. If you got 4 forward gears, you got a 4-speed. I don't care what the gear ratio is. So, for you guys out there calling it a 3-speed with overdrive, whatever. But, it's a 4-speed, guys. Sorry. It's a 4-speed. And, honestly, if you've got if you want to drive it on the highway, it's probably one of the best you can buy, because it gives you that low-end grunt with that really low 309, 308, or whatever it is, first gear. There's a bit of a spread from there to the next gear. Then you're right to 1 to 1. Okay, so it's like a 3-speed. It does have a pretty spread out numerical ratios. But if you, what was the big race car transmission in the day for the Chevrolets and GMs? It was the 2-speed power glide, right? So if you're going to race somebody, you just got 3 gears to worry about, because you're not going to put it in overdrive if you got the pedal to the metal, if you know what I mean. So really, it's more versatile. So if you want to call it a 3-speed with overdrive, have at it. But it looks nothing like a 3-speed. It's an A833 no matter how you slice it. Now, and I'll tell you a little trick while we're on that. The bearing for the overdrive unit is a big, like 5 1/4, I think. 5 inch and a quarter, something like that. The bearing is the same size as the 480. I think. Pretty close, if not. You can put the 480 bearing retainer on that and it'll function just fine. Because all the bolt holes are in the same place. And the oil doodah for the oil, that is in the same place too. So really, if you want to put it in a smaller bell housing, yeah, you can do it, right? You can do it just for the $80-something it costs, maybe it's $100 now, I don't know, for the bearing retainer. So there you go. Let's quit calling it a 3-speed with overdrive. It is a 4-speed, folks. It's just 4th gear is overdriven, I think, yeah, like I said, 0.73. So, you know, she'll drop the RPMs on the old highway if you want. So I'm putting one in my car. It's a big block car. That 309 first gear is going to be a little bit steep for my big block, I think. High revving small block would love it. Get that behind a 340, boy, you'd be ripping. And then you'd have a good top end too because of that overdriven fourth gear. Yeah, so high rev and small block, they're it. You know what I mean? But I'm gonna put it behind a big block. You know, it's the worst thing. You know, because I'm gonna drive it. I want to drive the car. Anyway, enough on the 833 4-speed. Since we're on the subject of Mopars, I have a little hot chocolate. It's Christmas Eve after all. While we're on the subject of Mopars, let's talk about cylinder heads. I'm a big block guy. I don't have any small block Mopar. I mean, I have them to sell, but none of my Mopars have small blocks. I'm just not a small block guy. Now, don't get me wrong, Chevrolet stuff, I'm still a big block guy. But, yeah, whatever. Anyhow, we'll go into the Chevys later. But anyhow, 315 heads. Everybody, and their brother calls up, says, I want 315 heads. Do they even know what 315 heads are? Probably not. From my understanding, and there's maybe some of you Mopar aficionados out there that can correct me on this if you like, and that's the idea of this video, is maybe get some participation from you all out there. Maybe get some comments. Call me an idiot, whatever. But 315 heads, to my understanding, were a casting number for a 67 only hypo engine. 67 only, 1967. So how popular do you think they are? Yep, you're right. Now, if you're restoring a 1967 GTX or Roadrunner, well, they didn't have Roadrunners yet, a GTX or some performance package that came with those, by all means, hunt them down, pay the price. But they're a large valve, small chamber head, and supposedly they flow a little better or whatever, and that's great. But they're so rare that I've never actually even seen a set. I've got a buddy that's been in this business, and I'm going to talk about him a little bit later too. I've been a buddy that's been in this business for years, and he's only seen like one pair his whole life. And his grandfather owned a junkyard for Mopars back in the day. So they're pretty rare. If you track them down, you're probably going to pay premium money for them. And honestly, they're not going to be that good. They're 1967 technology. I mean, if you're doing a restoration and you're trying to do numbers matching, by all means, spend the money. But there's other stuff out there that's cheaper and just as good or better. And the funny thing that I always get people asking for those, because that's what their, you know, brother's girlfriend's brother said to his friend that's a mechanic, and he said that those are the ones to get. So everybody wants them, but nobody knows what they're asking for. In reality, aftermarket heads are going to be way better. You can get a 516 head. They're probably a little pricey too, which are not as big a valve, but they got a small chamber if you want a tight chamber. But really, you got your 906s, your 452s, and those are going to be an open chamber head. And really, if you're building an engine, and you're probably going to port them, maybe, if you're going to use a cast iron head, you don't have to worry about the chamber design so much, because you know there are ins and outs of a closed chamber head. It's a good trick if you're trying to boost compression for cheap money back in the day, but it's not back in the day anymore. These are getting rare and they're getting expensive. And you could, if you're going to buy pistons, you can buy a pop-up piston for a 906 or 452 head and get just as much compression. In the old days, yeah, we used, and I still do it for cheap horsepower. I'll get a small chambered head, and that way I can use a flat top piston, and they tend to be a little cheaper. So it's a cheap way out. It's a hot rodder trick. But now that these cars are getting rare and expensive, it isn't worth trying to hunt down a set unless you're doing a numbers matching car. Buy an aftermarket head for the same kind of money, or buy a less expensive head, do a little work to it, and buy pop-up pistons. You know, because for what you're going to pay for a set of 315 super rare castings, you can buy better stuff. So, and again, a lot of these terms that I'm about to discuss and am discussing come from the old days of hot rodding when we were building cars on the cheap. There's nothing cheap about classic Mopars anymore. So really, don't worry about 315 heads unless you're building a 67 GTX, by all means. Just get yourself a good set of 452s. They're fairly plentiful, not super expensive. Or some 906s, they're getting a little more rare, but again, you know, they work. Do some pop-up pistons. If you're building it anyway, you can build whatever you want out of whatever you want. You know, spend a little time porting. Buy a crappy pair of heads and port them out. But if you're building a street car, none of that really matters. It's all about compression ratio, flow. Of course, you can't go too high in the compression. And that's a whole engine building thing, so we won't get into all that. But, you know, if you're building it, you can build it to go as fast as you want and not have to spend buku billion dollars on, you know, fancy heads that really aren't all that good anyway. My second Mopar snafu, cliche, gotta have request is 355 gears for their 8 3/4 inch rear. Why? 355 gears. Well, that's the first words out of my mouth. What size tire are you running? I don't know. Well, what kind of engine you got? 318. I'm like, why do you want a 355? Well, my brother's friend is a mechanic and he told me that's what I should get. What kind of driving you gonna do with the car? You know, just drive it around. Gonna go on the highway? Well, yeah. So you got a 318, 25-inch tire, automatic transmission, no overdrive, and you want to put a 355 gear and drive it on the highway with 318. No, you don't. You don't. Okay? Now you got a high revving 340 or a high revving whatever, you know, and you're going to be buzzing this thing up to 6,000 RPMs. Well, yeah, fine. Throw a 355 in there. Heck, go with a 411. Yeah, practical. If you're running a 29, 30-inch tire, you're going to go drag racing. Oh, fantastic. If you want to drive this thing, 355, it sounds like a nice round number, but you'll be doing 3,000 plus on the highway if you don't have a big tire under this thing. Now, if you get the overdrive transmission that we talked about, it might help out a little bit. You might get away with 355. Most big block Mopars came with a 323. And even with that, you know, they were revving pretty good on the highway. They were more boulevard cruisers, you know, for around town, that sort of thing, and stomping on the old gas and giving your next door neighbor Chevelle a good run for its money, you know, trying to get them big, heavy B bodies and get them moving, you know. So, you know, 355, you're going to pay more. Somebody calls me up asking for 355. If I have one, I soak them. Sorry, but that's because you can't get them because everybody wants them. But they don't even know why they want them. And it's the same thing, you know, with different transmissions and different heads. And everybody wants them because somebody told them that's what they want. Folks, do a little research. Find out what size tire you're going to run. What's your RPM range on your cam and in your engine? What kind of driving you going to do? These are all factors before you think about just popping in a set of gears because your brother-in-law said to do so. So 355s, if you want to pay the money, great, find them, you know, and almost everybody offers them because that's what everybody wants. But get a 323. Shoot, get a 308 gear, 294. If you got a big block of 294, it'll get you up and going. You know, if you want to do any highway cruising, you want to crank that baby up and try to keep up with the old Hellcats and Elephants, and of course you get that kind of horsepower probably. But if you know, if you're gonna go on the highway at all, you want to stick with a little bit, you know, taller gear. You try to get a 308. A 323 is probably for a street car that I might drive on the highway. I'm probably not going to go any lower than 323. High revving small block, sure, maybe I might go that route. But do your homework. Don't just say it because somebody told you that's what you want. And that happens so much. The last Mopar cliche, or misnomer, whatever you want to call it, that I want to discuss is the Poly 318. Called the semi-hemi. They got all sorts of nicknames. Made from like 1953-ish to about 1966 maybe. I think it's 66. Yeah, 66, at least 66, because I got one out here. It's a 66. The high performance versions came with a dual 4-barrel carburetor, and I believe that was 290-ish horse. The rest of the barnyard there came with a 2-barrel. Now, those came standard, either dual 4s for a performance model or 2-barrel for just a regular driver. Now, you could order the Super Pack. The Super Pack came with 4-barrel, single 4-barrel carburetor. That was the Super Pack, and it pushed like 245. So you get 290 horse with the dual quads. You get 245 with a single 4, so I'm not really sure why you'd order that. Or you get the 2-barrel, and I think that was like 215 or something-ish. Don't quote me on that. It's going on memory, and more leaks out than stays in nowadays. But I get numerous requests for 4-barrel intakes for a Poly. If you don't know what a Poly 318 is, originally back when they first came out, from like 55 to 62-ish, 53 to 62, somewhere in that area, they were like the early Hemis. They came with funky bell housings and goofy looking crankshaft ends and what have you. In 62, I think it was, they kind of just went with like a small block LA. Just a regular small block LA design. And on the block. Now, they're the same engine. They call them A blocks, I think. And it's basically the same engine. You can't put a Poly intake on an LA 318 or anything like that. But the bell housing and everything on the back's the same as the small block LA. But, so if you need an intake, you can get one from 53 or whatever it is all the way to 66. So that all interchanges. But a lot of things don't, so you have to really do your homework if you're trying to build a Poly. But the big thing is, not a whole lot of people order the Super Pack. The Super Pack is the only one, or the only thing you could order that would get you that 4-barrel intake. And I could be mistaken, but that was only offered up to 61 or 62. When they came with the 62, is it to 66? I could be wrong, and if anybody that knows more than me, there's a lot of guys that do, please correct me. It'll give me some comments. Say, yep, no, they did offer the 4-barrel Super Pack up until 66, but as far as I know, they stopped it in 61 or 2. So if you're looking for a 4-barrel Poly intake, you're looking for, hen teeth, you know what I mean, or chicken lips. You're looking for something that's really, really, really rare. So you're looking for a Super Pack intake, and I don't know why, because you can get, you can usually get a dual 4-barrel one for about $500 or $600. You find the 4-barrel, you're probably looking in the $1,200 range. So, and they were $500 back in the 80s. My buddy that has that junkyard I told you about, he's only seen 2 actual 4-barrel Polys in the entire career of his grandfather's salvage yard, which was all through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and 90s until his grandfather passed away. So 2 in 30-something years of Mopar junkyard, or salvage yard if you want to be politically correct. So guys, gals, give up on looking for a 4-barrel, unless, again, if you're restoring a rare Fuelie or something that had a Super Pack, by all means, track it down and buy one. But if you're just looking because you don't like the looks of your 2-barrel, get the dual quad one. Or better yet, buy a high performance 2-barrel. I've seen, 600 and something CFM 2-barrels. Yeah, they're pricey, but it'd kind of be cool. You got a 2-barrel and you're smoking the guy behind you, because you really got a 4-barrel CFM going on there. And put a big fat air cleaner. Nobody will know the difference. Or put an adapter plate if you need to have a 4-barrel that bad. Personally, I just go with the dual 4s. Get that, try to squeeze that whole 290 horse out of there and see what happens. But nonetheless, if you're looking for a 4-barrel Poly intake, if you're lucky enough to find one, you're probably going to pay some pretty premium money, because they're super rare. And that's it, guys. I hate to break it to you, you know. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, because this is my Christmas gift to you YouTubers, Yeah, that's right, right. Trying to get you guys to, you know, be practical in your engine builds and stuff, and try to not make you look like you're just a follower and doing what everybody tells you to do. You know, let's build them. You know, I understand you're asking questions when you're new in the hobby. Shoot, I was new in this hobby back, you know, we don't want to go back that far. But yeah, I 3/4 cammed everything, right? I had no idea what a 3/4 cam is, and that's going to be my next discussion. Yeah, I admit it. I was a Chevy guy. Still am. I still love Corvettes. You can tell, right? The big thing that everybody said in the 80s was, it's got a 3/4 race cam in it. Nobody even knows what a 3/4 race cam is. You know? Some people think it's 3/4 of a race cam. Well, that's what I thought anyway when I was young. Then I did a little research, and evidently it's a cam that has like 750 thousandths of lift. Okay, that's a pretty good sized cam, especially when you're talking a little mouse motor, small block Chevy. That's a mouse, you know. That's a pretty good sized cam for an engine that size. And that would be, honestly, that'd be a racing cam. 750 thousandths of lift on a street motor without being a roller cam, that's pretty stout. Probably wouldn't idle real good, if at all. You know, not really a practical street cam per se. So, you know, that wouldn't be a 3/4 race cam. That'd be a full race cam. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things, and I can't believe I've actually heard it today. I've heard it recently, within the last 6 months or a year. I've heard somebody, yeah, I got a 3/4 race cam in my car. Oh, no, you're kidding me, right? Did you just say that? Big thing everybody said, and it usually means that they just got a stock engine and they want to make you think they know what they're talking about. So, you know, don't tell people you got a 3/4 race cam. If you got some cam specs you want to brag about, hand them the cam card that comes with every camshaft and say, yeah, because most of my cams I think have around 500 lift. That'd be a half race cam, right? Okay. So, you know, I'm going to just piddle on the street with my little half race cams and be happy, right? Of course, actually I run big blocks, so they're more like 530 to 560 thousandths lift, advertised lift, I'm sorry. Duration usually around 300 and something ish. You know, small blocks, that's still a pretty stout cam even so. I think when I was running small blocks, I was running like 480 to 500 lift and 280 to 300 ish. So, you know, big block, small block, a little bit different. Mopars, I still haven't quite got the whole cam thing, because like 480 on a Mopar is huge for a big block Mopar. For a big block Chevy, they swallow way bigger cams than that. But for Mopar, that's a pretty stout cam, evidently. And you know, I've not built a lot of Mopar engines. I've built a lot of Chevy small and big blocks in my day. With Mopars, I'm still struggling along with the learning-ish. Building Barracuda, which I showed you guys. And it's got a 440, and I am thinking about, they have like a Hemi head conversion, but they're super expensive, almost as much for a set of heads as you would pay for buying a whole Hemi, you know. But there's, you know, they have a little more modern technology, so I'm considering it, but only if like I rob a bank or something. But nonetheless, let's not go there. I guess we'll move on to, because we were just talking about the 3/4 race cam. So let's move on to cylinder heads. 1983-ish, maybe 4. Graduated high school in 1980. That'll tell you how old I am. And built myself a little Chevy. Now, back then, everybody told me you've got to get some double hump Fuelie heads. That was the thing back then. The old Fuelie Corvettes and 57 Chevys, they came with Fuelie, fuel injection, Rochester fuel injection, and they came with performance heads that supposedly with a bomb, probably right up there with the whole 315 heads in 67. So that would be, I guess, 57 to 63-ish, maybe, I guess they were out. They were called Fuelie heads, and they had, if you looked at the little castings on the side, they had these two little humps. Not to be mistaken with the numerous 194 valve. They look like double humps, but they got like a bridge between them. Don't confuse them between the two. But that was 1983 or 4. That was, you know, and I massaged them babies. I had them ported. I had them cleaned up. I had them smoothed out. I had, you know, I did whatever. I put like $1,000 into those heads in, you know, in the 80s when I was making $110 a week, literally cashing my paycheck at the speed shop, which those don't hardly even exist anymore. Cashing my paycheck there, and he'd give me $15 back, which got me to work every day in my big Chevy Bel Air with a 307 in it. It got me to work every day at $15, and I had money left over to take the ladies out or, you know, do whatever. So the rest of it went into that engine until it was built, and it went into a 66 4-speed, 327, 66. I already said 66. Chevy 2, little Chevy 2 4-speed, pretty cool little squeak car. Kept breaking transmissions. He even put a Hemi box in there, which is the 833 with the course spline, and broke it. So that, of course, you know, that little small block she was main on transmissions. Of course, dropping the clutch at $6 grand was never good for anything, but never did hurt that 327. Nonetheless, those are great heads. Rarer than hen's teeth nowadays. And I still hear it. You know, I've got double humps. I got double hump heads. I got Fuelie heads. You can buy a set of aftermarket castings for less money than a set of Fuelies will cost you today, if you can even find them. If you're restoring a fuel-injected Corvette or fuel-injected, you know, Bel Airs, by all means, spend the money on getting a set of Fuelie heads or try to hunt them down. But if you're just building a hot rod, don't worry about it. Buy some aftermarket heads or get a set of anything with a big valve in it, you know. Old 80s, 70s, and 60s technology cylinder heads are not going to give you the bite for the buck that you can get out of this aftermarket stuff. And it's getting cheaper. Set of heads, I've seen halfway decent heads for, I think, around $1,200, $1,300 a pair, ish. You know, if you hunt them, I don't think it's getting expensive, so I'm probably off. I haven't looked for heads for about a year now. But if you find a set of Fuelie heads, you're probably going to pay that anyway. I'm building an engine now, small block Chevrolet, for a supercharged engine, which I'm not spending a lot of money on heads because I'm going to force the air in anyway. And I'm using stock 400 castings that came with the 400 small block that I'm putting in it. I O-ring the block, got it ready for the boost. But the heads, just everyday 194 valve, open chamber, 400 small block heads. Nothing fancy. Of course, I'm supercharging this, so that makes things a little different. Pardon me. I have to have a little more hot chocolate here. Yeah. So, Fuelies, most of the time I hear double hump. I don't hear the Fuelie term too much anymore. I think people have forgotten that double hump was a Fuelie head. And even then, they were pretty expensive. I think I paid, I'd be lying to you if I said I remember, but I paid pretty premium money for them before I spent $1,000 on them. I think I might have spent $1,000 before I spent $1,000. So, you know, that'll tell you what I spent back then. I just kept cashing that paycheck and he told me what I needed, you know, because I didn't know anything about cars at the time. And I even had a buddy help me put it together, but that was a great little engine. That was my first one ever, and I just kept, you know, I got old and learned how to do a lot of that stuff myself. Anyway, so don't be hunting down Fuelie heads unless you got to restore a car that requires them to be numbers matching. And don't be walking around saying you got 3/4 cams and double hump heads unless you know what you're talking about, you know, because people are going to look at you like, why? I just bought a set of Edelbrock heads for, you know, this much money, and I've just smoked you on the racetrack. So anyway, yeah, don't double hump Fuelies. Great heads if you're restoring a car, you know, but don't waste your time and breath, you know, looking for them unless you're restoring something. Plain and simple. Next thing I want to mention, and this one I'm stretching it a little bit because a lot of it's hearsay, won't hold up in a court of law, but there's some stigmas that surround certain brands of items, and two of them that I'd like to mention are Fram filters and Champion spark plugs. I had to put a set of Champions in my daughter's Cadillac a couple weeks back, and I kind of freaked because I ordered something different, and when the parts guy showed up, I already had the engine ready for him, because you got to take the plenum off and everything. You can watch that video. And he brought me Champions. I'm like, I didn't ask for Champions. I think I asked for NGKs or I think AC Delco. I asked for AC Delcos because it's a Cadillac, so GM AC Delco. Little did I know is the guy who started Champion spark plugs actually also invented AC Delco. Didn't know that. I found that out when doing some research. I was trying to find some actual research that I could tell you so it wouldn't be hearsay on the plugs, you know, from what I've heard, why there's a stigma surrounding Champion spark plugs. Because back in the 80s, when I was younger, in the 90s, people are, don't get Champion spark plugs. And I'm like, why? Oh no, your car will run like poop. And I'm like, okay. Never did know why, so I finally found out. I was talking to somebody, what's the stigma around Champion spark plugs? And they told me, this is a parts store people, you know, hopefully they would know, right? Maybe, maybe not, I don't know. But he said what happened is, back in the day, Champion, I don't know if they had a recall, because I don't know if those existed back in those, you know, back in the 70s or 80s. But they actually were manufacturing some that they forgot to put something inside, and so they weren't making a connection. So you put them in a car, it wouldn't run. So people were getting mad about this, and I guess they recalled them and had all sorts of problems. But that's hearsay. Couldn't find any actual research on that particular thing happening, that there was defective plugs that were going out where the actual electrode wasn't grounding somehow or whatever. But I did find a lawsuit between Champion and a private company, and this company was basically refurbishing spark plugs. They were taking used spark plugs and they were refurbishing them. And now I'm thinking that maybe this had something to do with the stigma that surrounded defective plugs. Because I just did on my MR2, and you can see that video too. I changed the injectors on my MR2. And when I changed the injectors, the car wouldn't run. So I pulled the injectors back out, and when I looked at them, they looked terrible. They looked dirty. They looked defective. If I had looked at them beforehand, I probably wouldn't have put them in. All I did was clean up the outside. And I put my old injectors back in, and ended up, of course, I still had the same mist that I had originally. I may have moved the mist, I don't know, because at that time I wasn't really sure what was causing it. But I got defective rebuilt parts. So I'm thinking that may have happened to Champion, where this company was refurbishing their spark plugs and selling them, and you don't, by law, you didn't have to change the name on the spark plug. You just have to make sure you tell people it's a refurbished product. And I'm thinking, this is rumor, I'm making this up, so, you know, but this is my deduction based on the evidence, because that's the only thing that I could find that was actual truth, other than the hearsay that I heard that they were making, you know, defective plugs right from the factory. But I don't have any proof of that, and I did a pretty intense search. But I'm guessing, so maybe these refurbished plugs were not lasting very long or not working at all, and so it gave Champion a bad name. And so Champion sued them over it, and come to find out they weren't doing anything wrong, because you don't have to change the name on the plug, evidently. So I don't think they ever got any money, but that may be why we have that stigma surrounding Champion plugs. If you've never heard about that, don't worry about it. The other thing is Fram filters. Now, I did do some research on Fram filters. I heard hearsay, couldn't find any proof on this either, that Fram back in the day actually messed up their bypass valves, put too big a spring in there or whatever. And what? And it wouldn't even allow oil in. They couldn't even. You wouldn't. You pull out your filter and there's nothing in it. That's hearsay. Now, truth is, Fram evidently, and to this day, I haven't cut one open, so I don't know this personally. And I may, the next Fram filter I get on a car that I get in, I may go ahead and pull it and check it out. But supposedly the big stigma behind Fram is because you can buy different quality, you know, even Napa filters. You can get, you know, the gold and the platinum, and the, you know, you can get better filters. So, you know, upgrade. But Fram supposedly glues their elements together. You know, it's glue. You know, of course nowadays we got some epoxies that you can, you know, shoot, you could probably glue your tires on your truck to the ground with them, and you won't move your truck. But whatever the case may be, that's the big stigma that I understood from doing some research on it, is that Fram filters are glued together, you know, because you make a little loop and then you glue it together. Whereas all other filters, decent filters, are crimped in a metal crimp. You know, so I can get it. You can pull a Fram filter apart and that glue came loose and you didn't have any filter. The other thing is, and this could be just quality of filter, you know, supposedly they're at they're at 20 microns, and other filters are 40 microns. So you can, so you're getting more stuff with a 40 micron, obviously, because they're getting smaller stuff stuck in the filter. But now, here's what I'm questioning. If an air filter is keeping more junk out of your engine, it's also restricting air. Okay? So if you're getting smaller particles of oil, and you're probably allowing less oil through the filter as it's filtering, and it's going to get clogged faster. So if you're only doing 20 microns and you're allowing more oil through faster, you're going to catch the bigger stuff, obviously, because you're filtering more oil faster. So I don't know which would be better. Now the whole glue thing, you know, if you crimp something, yeah, it seems like it'd be a little better. Okay, because who knows how good glue holds up in oil. But evidently it's been holding up for years. I don't know. I still don't buy Fram filters, but only because, and I really still am a little afraid of Champion spark plugs, but only because it's been so embedded in my mind, you know. And I've got them in the Cadillac now, and it worked for a little while, and now I'm still getting that miss. And so I've got another video coming up on me having to change the fuel injector, because that's probably what it is. I should have, and I said it in the video, that I should have replaced the fuel injector. And I'm also going to go ahead and replace the coil when I do it, because you got to take the plenum off and everything. That's a whole nother video. Nonetheless, if you run Fram filters, if you're changing your oil every 3,000 miles on an older car, you're probably going to be fine. If you're changing them like in my diesel truck, I'm changing them every 5,000. I always opt for a better quality filter anyway. I always buy like the K&N or the Napa Gold, or I always buy the top end filter, because diesel trucks ain't cheap, and I don't need that engine. It leaks everywhere anyway, but I don't need it breaking. So I buy the best. I actually bought a fuel filter that when I got it open, the box was, I'm not putting that piece of crap in my truck. So I called them up and I said, I don't want this, give me the top line one, and I got it from somebody else. I ended up getting it through Napa, because I trust Napa parts, but that's not an advertisement, that's just me. So yeah, honestly, if you care about your engine, I'd go ahead and spend $12, $15 on a good filter. Don't buy the bottom of the line anything. And I don't know what Fram's top of the line, maybe they crimp it, I don't know. Rumor has it, I've never opened one, so I'm not speaking from experience. Rumor has it that they glue them together and they only filter 20 microns. But again, 20 microns, 40 microns, 40 is going to get clogged up faster. 20 is going to allow more oil to get filtered faster. They all have check valves. If it gets clogged up, it's just bypassing that valve anyway once your filter gets clogged. I guess basically what it boils down to is I wouldn't worry about it too much, but change your oil frequently, especially in an older car, especially if you end up with running them a little rich, or you know, maybe having any kind of a fuel problem where she wouldn't start right away and you had to sit there pumping fuel and whatever, then you probably washed it into the crankcase. So, you know, if you like buying cheap filters, just change them more often. You know, if you're running a race car, I know guys that change their oil like every race. You know, well, not every race, but every day of racing. Maybe more, maybe every race. So if you're going to do that, by all means, buy the cheapest filters you can buy. Throw them in there, because you're yanking them out every week. So yeah, who cares? Just get the cheap one. But for me, I like to put about 5,000 miles on my truck, or on any modern car, because there's not as much gas wash. On my hot rods, every 3,000 miles, because actually I probably do it way more often than that, because I don't even drive 3,000. I've got so many cars that I hardly put 3,000 miles in a year or 2 or 3. So anyway, that's the whole Fram Champion spark plug stigma. But not least, I wanted to talk about rat rods. I don't have a rat rod. I did. I had a '69 Chevy ramp truck. Basically, you put a car up on the back, and it was a rat rod. It had rusty panels that I never fixed. I did coat them so they wouldn't get worse. Paint was not perfect. It was chipping, and it was a rat rod. Took it to Hershey with a gremlin on the back of it, and they wouldn't even let me in. They were like, you ain't coming in here. But it was basically because I only had my window sticker sitting in the window. I didn't have it glued on. I a plethora. They're real sticklers on the rules over there. But I got some looks when I pulled in with that old ramp truck loaded up like Beverly Hillbillies with a trailer on the back with parts all hanging off. But it was a rat rod. So what is a rat rod? What is, the difference between a hot rod, a rat rod, a resto rod? There's all these different names for the stuff we drive. Barn find. So rat rod, to me, is a car that somebody spent all of their money on performance. Or just making it look cool, chopping it, channel it, lower it, slam it, dunk it, raise it, shave it, whatever. They did all sorts of cool modifications or stuff to their vehicle, but it's void of paint or any kind of rust repair or panel repair. Might have dents or whatever in it, or they might leave the welds. I always think that's cool when they chop it and they leave all the welds so you can see just how intricate their work is. That's a rat rod, okay? These, you get a piece of junk car that's falling apart and you just don't want to fix stuff. That's not really a rat rod. That's just a ratty car, Now, hot rods, back in the day, we spent all our money on performance stuff, and I couldn't afford paint, so we always threw primer on them. Just that hot rod black, what they call it nowadays. Back in the day, it was just primer. And primer is absorbent, so it's really the worst thing you can put on your car. And we would, we fiberglassed the holes up, or I've seen people spray foam in there and just kind of smooth it out with a little Bondo. We did some pretty bad stuff, but you just didn't spend a lot of money on paint and stuff. You spent all your money on performance. And we even had 2 different car clubs when I was a kid. The one club was the bling club, where they had all the chrome. Pardon me. They had all the chrome. We used to joke, chrome won't get you home. And then there was our club, which was way less guys, but we were the nuts that spent all the money on performance and weren't too worried about paint. So those were the hot rods of old, which kind of are now those are the rat rods of today. Rat rods usually tend to be early 30s stuff, sometimes 40s, so they do tend to lean towards the street rod crowd, because street rods are usually those 30s, 40s, low and super fancy chopped rods and stuff like that. So there's street rod crowd, rat rod crowd, tend to kind of be the same. But I've had my truck was a 69, and it still fit into the rat rod persona, if you will. And there's a lot of YouTubers out there. One of my favorites, he don't put paint on hardly nothing, and he just gets them running, drives them home. Maybe he makes a few modifications here, puts LSs in them and Hemis in them, modern stuff. Which those are the retro rods of today. So now they're mixing the rat rod, retro rod thing in there. I'm pretty much a hot rod guy. Hot rod guys are just all about performance. I do like to paint them. And you can have a hot rod that's painted. So, that doesn't necessarily decide. But a lot of what I do is probably more resto rod, which is kind of just restoring an old car, making it look good, but putting aftermarket parts in there and stuff that doesn't necessarily matter. But then you get into tribute cars. And I'm not going to go overboard on this whole thing, because I'm just going to wrap this up, because it is Christmas. I'm not going to wrap it up. I'll wrap it up, but I will wrap it up. But the whole tribute car, tribute car. Now, I'm building a tribute car. You've only seen a tiny glimpse of it, and I call it the Mad AMX. And I'm building basically a Mad Max car. But it's the wrong kind of car. It's not an Australian Falcon. It's an AMX, Javelin. But I am going to copy the Mad Max car. So it's a tribute. There are movie tribute cars. I was building a Superbird. I ended up selling it before I finished it. But I was building a Superbird. It was going to be a tribute car. Although, it was more of a resto rod tribute car. Because a tribute is really a car that is 100% just like the original. All the right stuff. But it's just not an original. The numbers just don't say it's an original. Might have started life as a satellite or something. Now it's a Superbird. Mine was going to be more like a resto rodded tribute. It was going to be a Superbird, but it's going to have a supercharged Hemi. Yeah, so you can put whatever label you want on your car. Don't let anybody kid you. If it's a rat rod, cool. If it's a it's a hot rod, street rod, resto rod, tribute, it's all good. Barn find, now that's a good one. Barn finds are cars that were so nice when they found them in the barn they didn't touch them. Maybe got them running. They're just like they found them. So those are kind of cool. Those are big nowadays too. So don't get hung up on what your car is called. Just enjoy it. Do what you want to do. Maybe make your own car. You know, something that somebody hasn't thought of. Put a fancy name on it. Like, aha. Like, I don't know what to call my Gremlin. You know, it's got some original AMC parts, but it don't have fancy paint. It's got what was on it. It's gonna have Chevy transmission, or GM anyway. A Jeep bell housing. It's still AMC. Some aftermarket stuff. I don't know what it is. I'm just gonna call it a hot rod. You know, it's not really a rat rod because it's not ratty. It's got paint. It's just not perfect paint. I'm just gonna call it a hot rod. You decide. This whole video was basically my gift to you for Christmas. Trying to set some things straight and also stimulate some comments in the comment section. Maybe so we can get to know one another. I have an email if you'd like to, but I forget to check it all the time. So until I get used to checking it, you're welcome to use it if you want to kind of do more private stuff. It's ESSIGSPEED, so essig@yahoo.com. You are welcome to email that email if you want to talk to me direct, but please be understanding because I forget to check it all the time. I do. In fact, sometimes when I go to log on to it, they're like, "Who are you?" And I gotta go through the whole password thing over again because I, don't check it often enough. But the best thing to do is comments, and that's kind of why I'm doing this, is try to stimulate some comments from some of you all that are watching these videos, or at least watching this one. And tell me I'm an idiot, tell me I'm brilliant, tell me you agree, tell me you don't agree. Just get some interaction so I can get to know who my fans are, I've got 400 and something subscribers out there, and I've got some good guys that I talk to quite often, and I enjoy their comments every time. I try my best to answer them. Sometimes I might miss one or two, but I try my best. But throw some comments out there. I'd love to see my comments just go, 15, 20, 30, 60, 100, 800, 300, whatever. So throw some comments. I'm hoping this video will stimulate a few comments because, oh, for sure, if you have other cliches and misnomers, like maybe you work in a parts store. Oh, what was the other one somebody was complaining about? The 24 valve Cummins. I got a 24 valve. Yeah, I don't even know what that means. Well, I know what it means, but I'm not sure why that's special. But evidently it was special to this guy because he walked in the parts store all bragging about his 24 valve Cummins. I've got a Cummins. I don't know if it's 24 valve or not. It starts up every day. No, not a big diesel guy. I love diesels, but I don't know a lot about them. But anyway, if you know something about the 24 valve diesel, throw it up there. I'll be glad to listen. I appreciate y'all watching. Do me a favor, please subscribe. Don't hold this video against me. It's just stuff that I hear a lot, and it's just like, oh, come on. It's rare stuff, guys. Let's get modern. Let's forget those old 80s builds. Of course, now there's probably, you got LS swaps, you got Hemi swaps, and late model swaps of all kinds. Coyote motors, those things. I'm not a big Ford guy, but those things are beasts. So I'm sure there's some terms out there now for the guys building that stuff, which I'm not big on the modern stuff yet, so bear with me on the old school. But these are the old school terminologies that are just antiquated. And so I know there's a lot of you older guys watching my channel. I'm an older guy, and but still not sporting a 3/4 cam, folks. It's just not happening. And I do have a poly, but it's got a 2-barrel. And just get yourself a dual quad poly, nonetheless. But that's my pet peeves, cliches, miscellaneous misnomers, and terms that just don't make sense. So Merry Christmas. Appreciate y'all watching. Please subscribe and do me a favor and mash on the old like button if you liked this video.